Yo, I got banned from events, and here's how it went down. I did nothing wrong, man. I did nothing wrong whatsoever. I got banned. I didn't even know I got banned. I didn't get no email.
A lot of people don't know this, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Started out as a horror manga more akin to kaiju than its modern shonen interpretation. The spirit of an evil pharaoh would possess the body of Yugimoto in order to punish evil by betting their lives on games. Eventually, a parody of Magic the Gathering was covered in the manga called Duel Monsters. This game became so popular with fans of the manga that Yu-Gi-Oh's mangaka Kazuki Takahashi decided to reboot the series into what many people recognize as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. It's important to know this, as despite how much the modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime is all about the fun of the game, and the TCG has turned into this, early Yu-Gi-Oh! Still stays within its horror manga roots.
Is that dick good? Yes, kid.
Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, being the first spin-off series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, brings an odd blend between the old and the new eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! This video was originally going to be a review of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX's anime, but that show in its totality is 180 episodes, and despite watching it before, I haven't watched every episode, and it would take too long to experience the whole thing again to make an accurate review of the show. I've got a bunch of shit to do. So instead I'm going to be looking at the manga, which I'd honestly recommend if you don't want to spend time watching a long shonen. The entire run is 65 chapters, including a one-shot epilogue chapter that doesn't even have to be read to process the entire story. This felt like it was a long time coming, especially for me. I've heard that the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga reinterprets some characters, and in some cases it's actually better than the original story, which I wanted to see for myself. One last thing before we get started, I'm going to be referring to characters with their English and Japanese names interchangeably, although I will remain consistent with whatever name I called them initially to begin with. Essentially, I will be calling some characters by their English names and some by their Japanese names, simply because of which version of the character stood out to me more. Without further ado, let's take a look at
Yu-Gi-Oh! GX!
Yu-Gi-Oh! GX takes place after its predecessor, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Duel Academy is opened in order to teach the next generation of duelists how to play Duel Monsters. The Academy is separated into 3 houses, being the Obelisk Blues, the Raw Yellows, and the Slifer Reds. Our main character Jaden Yuki is a part of the Red Dorm with his friend Cyrus Truesdale. Carrying the torch of his mentor and friend Kyo Hibiki, Jaden uses the elemental heroes to reach his goal of becoming the next Duel King. During his time in school, he combats a dark evil that has existed during the times of the Shadow Games, and when the Nameless Pharaoh still walked the earth as immortal. Jaden eventually teams up with his rival Monjome to combat the evil and seal the darkness away for good. Yu-Gi-Oh! Mangas have a reputation of being short in comparison to their anime counterparts, and because of this, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX gets a very linear and short story. This is a huge benefit. While the story of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is definitely more detailed and has better heights than the manga, its length contributes to so many sections of the story being meaningless or dull. This doesn't happen in the manga due to how short it is. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end that keeps itself short and concise. The trade-off being the best parts of the manga not reaching the peaks that the anime has. This results in readers being able to experience a great alternative story that tweaks elements of its original to provide a more solid and consistent interpretation of the already established world and characters of the original continuity. I feel like these changes were able to create a story that is consistently good from beginning to end. Not only that, but if you enjoy the story, I can easily see happy manga readers jumping off the deep end and watching the original 180 episode run. There's something here for both newcomers to the franchise and Yu-Gi-Oh! Veterans, and that something is of an odd high quality. If I were to make a final comparison, I would say that the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga is to its original anime as Ultimate Spider-Man is to its original 616 Spider-Man run. Both are clear alternate stories that use the older elements that made the previous incarnation great, and adds new elements that make the canon less of a headache to get into. Similar to the section about general story, the writing of the manga is familiar yet different. Our main cast has very similar personality types and interactions when compared to their anime counterparts, with slight differences between. I found these changes to the Elseworld counterparts to be very enjoyable. I'll explain more when I get into the characters, but this version of GX has a tendency to fix the mistakes of its predecessor. One huge difference is that the writing in GX's manga is very linear and straightforward in comparison to the anime. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX has a tendency to fall into the classic shonen pitfall of being overly bloated as well as overly complicated for no other reason except for the sake of having a detailed story. What started the story was a game with a dark mystique that had connections to the ancient world, and now we have that plus dual aliens, an alternate dimension, a dueling monkey, the demonic counterparts to the Egyptian gods, and some dude's ex-girlfriend from a past life. Also, Dio's here. I'm not joking, it's the same voice actor and everything. He even plays an Arcana-based deck and says the world.
そしてムーントークンとザ・チャリオットを生贄に大アルカナのラストナンバーアルカナフォース21ザ・ワールドを召喚次は丈太郎貴様だ
やろうディオ
ほう向かってくるのか逃げずにこのディオに近づいてくるのかせっかく祖父のジョセフが私のザワールドの正体を試験終了チャイム直前まで問題を解いている受験生のような必死こいた気分で教えてくれたというのに
近づかなきゃてめえをぶちのめせないんだな
ほうほうでは十分近づくがよい
What confuses me the most is that Yu-Gi-Oh! GX has a very simple narrative if you ignore all the dumb shonen bullshit. If you boil down everything into one idea, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is a story about growing up and learning to enjoy life as an adult despite the hardships that one will face. And while GX's manga doesn't entirely follow through with this narrative, it clearly does embody this idea through Jaden and how he interacts with Kyo and his heritage. For a majority of the manga, Jaden uses the deck of his comatose mentor, Kyo Hibiki. Although, after his first defeat at the academy and confrontation with the evil of the world, he decides to build a deck that's all his own design. In his own words, there's no strong or cool duelist out there that can control the elemental heroes like Kyo Hibiki. Jaden makes the choice that in order for him to grow and become better, he has to make his own deck. It's an important step for this character too, as, to Jaden, a duelist's cards are the very same as their soul. When faced with a serious challenge in his life, his solution is to change and face the future with his own strength, and not the strength of others. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX has a reputation of being the slice of life Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-off, and I've gotta say this is definitely true on a certain level. And it's definitely the reason why I like it the most out of the other ones as well. The entire premise of the show is just that people play a card game to solve their disputes, so it only makes sense for it to be a bunch of dumb kids in school. Because as much as I think the game is cool, it feels weird to have adults solve adult problems over a game that is recommended for the ages 6 and above. This reflects in all of its characters. Being a part of a school, our main cast is young and looking towards their future as adults, which not only ties into the inherent theme of the show, but also reflects in their personality traits. In the original story, most of the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX characters act way above their age. I don't get the impression that these kids are young teens in school. This is a problem that is kind of persistent in most Yu-Gi-Oh! Stories. I mean, the oldest Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist was like 18 years old, and even then, from what I've watched of 5Ds, Yusei doesn't feel like an 18-year-old. Even Yugi doesn't feel like a kid, but in those cases it doesn't matter since their youth isn't a part of what defines these characters. GX, on the other hand, has its premise entirely based around the concept of going to school, so it kind of feels like they should be written to be less Disney adult teen and more Ash Ketchum-esque, if you catch my drift. Not only that, but GX characters have a tendency to fall very flat, gravitating toward one singular personality trait. This problem only becomes an issue when you realize that Yu-Gi-Oh! GX has one of, if not the biggest cast out of any Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-off series. It gets worse when you realize that despite the huge cast, after a while, Jaden was the only person who ever dueled whenever actual stakes were involved. Despite being surrounded by competent duelists and the best of the best, it for some reason always fell on Jaden's shoulders to save the day, which made absolutely no sense to me. The manga circumvents this idea altogether. The cast itself is still big, but it cuts characters as well as cuts how many characters will be used within the story in order to stick to just the essentials. Johan having a ginormous impact in the original story, acting as a foil to Jaden, is merely just another side character.
No, I can't be gay with a southern accent, Jesse. Don't you drive a Prius? That was my mom's car, shut up.
The main group of like 8 to 10 characters has simply been cut down to 5, and all of these characters bring different dynamics to this new main group that I think fits these characters even better than their original interpretations. All of these characters have the same shared characteristic of wanting to be the best duelist, which I think makes a lot of sense considering the setting. Our main characters attend a prestigious duel academy, a place to hone your skills as a duelist and in turn have a chance to become the next duel king. All of these kids grew up admiring the legendary duelists that came before them, and it only makes sense that they'll share a competitive fire. Just look at how many people wanted to become YouTubers after seeing PewDiePie make more than like the national debt monthly.
What a fucking nick.
For the sake of a better analysis, I'm just going to be going through each character and giving a basic summary of their role within the main group, their small arcs within the story, as well as explaining their character traits that are specifically unique to them, simply because their distinctions from their anime counterparts make them way better in my opinion. Bastion Misawa is considered to be the book-smart individual of the group. He remains the most technical and definitely represents the character traits that most modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have today.
Yo, I got banned from events, and here's how it went down. So I got banned from my old video I made, where I jokingly made a video. I jokingly told the world that I stalled for time. I didn't stall.
He's a bit of a dueling historian, considering that he has many recordings of famous duels from the past. In comparison to his academic peers, he plays much more on an analytical side, actively changing his strategies to specifically counter his opponents. The only time he really loses his temperament is when he's around Asuka, who he has a crush on. Speaking of Asuka Tenjoin, this piece of white bread has finally had a complete makeover in comparison to her anime counterpart. Asuka, despite being the girl of the group, detests the idea of being represented by her gender. This is one of the biggest changes, second to another character that I'm going to mention later, but anime Asuka felt way more like waifu fat bait than like an actual character. After all, the most meaningful part of her character was an implied crush on Jaden, while in the manga, she acts nothing like this. Asuka not only duels more, but she definitely acts more like her anime debut self, a strong duelist who actually lives up to the hype of being a top student. She has a small arc that kind of pokes at this idea of being eye candy, and she herself detests the idea, claiming to everybody in the academy that she strives to be seen as a duelist rather than just a girl. She definitely seems more independent in this interpretation of the story, way more in lines of Jolene Cujo than Arena Pendleton, if you catch my drift. Cyrus Truesdale is Jaden's best friend throughout the entirety of the story, and between arcs they're frequently seen together because they're both living in the same dorm. They also are a part of the most jokes together simply because they're together the most. While Cyrus is portrayed with a sense of self-deprecation, it's not to the degree of the anime. Within 2 chapters, he moves beyond his self-doubt and declares his own rivalry with his older brother, which is a big deal. The Hell Kaiser is considered to be one of, if not the best duelist in all of GX. For context, the anime Cyrus does eventually do the same, but after like 3 seasons and being in his final year of school. Chad Manga Cyrus, on the other hand, is still in his first year, still being classified as the worst rank within his social hierarchy, declares that he will defeat his older brother. And while he never does end up doing this, he carries himself with a huge amount of confidence that Anime Cyrus never would have. He even stands on his own against Manjome, and he almost beats him. Manjome is the rival to Jaden. Being similar to Jaden, he can also talk to duel spirits, although up until his initial loss to Jaden, he believed that a duelist's strength is strictly his own. Seeking to be the next duel king, he begins to duel with his duel spirit partner, the Light and Darkness Dragon, in order to climb the ranks of Duel Academy. Manjome definitely has had the most change in comparison to his counterpart. In this narrative, he's more like a Vegeta archetype, while in the original adaptation, he just eventually devolved into a joke. It's cool to see this character actually become what he was originally conceived as, being Jaden's version of Seto Kaiba. And one thing of note that I love about this version of Manjome is that while he is a part of the group, he doesn't really feel like one of their friends. He's just there because he wants to get stronger, and he knows that the only way to do that is to be around people that are like himself. Despite teaming up with multiple members of the main party, he still seems like a solitary loner that's only really there because it specifically benefits himself. In this story, he also seems way more like a deuteragonist rather than a traditional rival, and this distinction in his role within the story is definitely the reason why I think the Vegeta comparison sticks. And finally, our protagonist, Jaden Yuki. an odd example of the manga characterization being worse than the anime. Jaden in both series is still joyful and full of life, however, by the end of the anime, he has a sense of maturity that the manga one doesn't have. This is clearly due to the anime Jaden going through about 3 more years of adventures, and the manga one just doesn't go through these, to my knowledge at least. Although this isn't necessarily a knock on the manga version of the character. He still grows plenty within this first year. In fact, if I were to compare both Season 1 Jaden and this version of Jaden, I'd say that proportionally, the manga version of this character grows more. I've already explained it with Jaden making his new Masked Hero deck, but not only does he grow, he also has more of a motivational stake within the story, as well as more of a reason to be a better duelist than to just be the best. Now, it might have taken me a while to explain this main group, but if you've been paying attention and watched the original show, you might have noticed that these characters are still the same people. However, either their characterization or role within the story is changed just a tiny bit in order to better fit within this new world. This concept doesn't just apply to our main cast, but also every other Elseworld counterpart that makes an appearance. Not only that, but these new dynamics create interactions that feel way more down to earth. Jaden specifically is treated like a normal dude from the beginning of the story until the end, and isn't just some messiah figure. Yes guys, as much as somebody is good at a game, it's still possible for them to lose. I just like these versions of these characters. They're way deeper than their counterparts and genuinely feel like friends, which is important, especially considering that these people see each other every day. Kind of a subsection before I wrap up, but the manga's art is really nice. One thing that does irk me about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is the art style when it comes to specific characters. I mean, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Art style is iconic, and all of its character designs are amazing, but seeing Yu-Gi-Oh! GX characters before Season 4, I just get the feeling that these people don't get their proper amount of vitamins. Like, they are skinny people, but I don't think someone with Slim Jim legs like this is gonna be able to support any type of body weight. The manga definitely changes this. The art style still feels like Yu-Gi-Oh!, but they just don't look stupid. Characters are drawn with an odd sense of realism and proportions that shots like this are very common, and they look fucking dope. Plus, you have to admit that the art of the monsters drawn are amazing. You know you've done something right when the official card art of your monster you drew is just a screenshot of your manga panel.
When you get to hell, tell them Viper sent you.
This is for the Belgium Empire!
Dodge.
The Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga is a redux of its original story that fixes many of its predecessors' flaws at the cost of a shorter narrative and the loss of depth. However, I definitely recommend new and old fans to read the book if they don't want to watch the original 180 episode run of the show. The characters are great, the story is generic but enjoyable, and everything that made the original story great is present in this adaptation. Fuck me. Off the script, I just wanted to say thank you for watching the video. There was a lot of stuff that I wanted to put into it, but I just didn't have enough time to. The script was already getting pretty big. But I really recommend you to check out the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga if you liked the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Show and you maybe didn't like watching GX from like the first episode or something. Go give the manga a read. It'll give a breath of fresh air into these new characters. Also, if you really liked Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime and you just wanted more, feel free to read the manga. The story is completely different. You'll like it. And I also wanted to say I'm sorry for not uploading in a bit. I've been busy with school, my finals are done. I did good in my classes, so that's pretty good there. Just know that a bunch of videos are coming. There's gonna be one last Yu-Gi-Oh! Video I think I'm gonna do, and then I'll move on. I don't know what's next for the channel. Persona 3 Reload's coming out in 2 months, so maybe I'll play that, but yeah. I thank you for getting to the end of the video if you got here. I don't think you did, but if you did, thank you. Bye-bye.
Think, Mark, think. What will you have after 500 years? Ooh, nothing, bitch! Fucking nothing, Mark!